Your data is like gold to hackers, and they'll sell it to the highest bidder. Are you protected? McAfee helps shield you, blocking suspicious texts, malicious emails, and fraudulent websites. McAfee Secure VPN lets you browse safely, and its AI-powered text scam detector spots threats instantly. You'll also get up to $2 million of award-winning antivirus and identity theft protection, all for just $39.99 for your first year. Visit McAfee.com. Cancel anytime. Terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
Scaachi Koul calls herself a divorce doula, which is kind of a joke, but also kind of not.
I'm like, what's that fable about that guy who plays a flute and all the kids follow him because nobody will pay him for getting rid of the rats?
The Pied Piper. The Pied Piper.
I'm like that, but I'm just getting divorced women to follow my piping.
Scaachi writes an advice column about divorce for Slate. She just published a book about divorce. It's called Sucker Punch. She's also interested in divorce as a political act.
I think the election was an interesting flashpoint. There were so many women who were kind of talking very quietly online, usually anonymously, about should I leave him if Trump wins?
So if you're following me on my page, you know that I have been actively talking to my husband about ending our 17-year marriage.
Scaachi started seeing these posts on Reddit, on TikTok.
Trump, and everybody's like, oh, well, it's just politics. People can have differing opinions. No.
There were so many women who were using it as a diary and being like, I'm thinking of leaving him. I don't know what to do. I tried to talk to him about how he's going to vote. We have a daughter.
So if you're unhappy in your marriage, now might be the time to act.
This is when Scaachi got curious.
I wanted to know if they were going to do it. Because leaving is hard.
How did you convince women to talk to you?
I asked nicely.
For the last few months, Scaachi's been following 3 women who'd had enough of their Trump-supporting husbands. 3 women who saw this election as a decision point for the country, but also for themselves. Can I ask you, you were following these 3 women through the lead up to the election and afterwards. What did they feel like the election would tell them about their marriage that they wouldn't have determined on their own?
They all understood that it meant nothing, ultimately. But it was a question of whether they could continue to dissociate. If Harris won the election, then that meant that they could continue with their lives under at least some perhaps false belief that the world was put right in order. But if Trump wins, then that means there isn't that sort of sheen of it's safe, everything's fine. You have to confront that you live with somebody who did this.
Today on the show, we all know Trump's back in Washington. But how is his victory playing out in some of our most intimate relationships? I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. This episode is brought to you by Home Chef. The cold weather is sticking around, but Home Chef is delivering hearty recipes and comfort foods to help you stay cozy and warm. You know what's great about Home Chef is that all their meals come ready to cook even if you are a novice. So what I used Home Chef for recently was making sure my teenage kid, our household carnivore, had food he loves, even when the rest of us are sitting around with a bowl of rice and beans. He was able to take a break from homework and get something hot on the table for himself in just a half an hour because Home Chef recipes are just that easy. Home Chef delivers fresh ingredients and chef-designed recipes right to your doorstep. Users of leading meal kits have rated Home Chef #1 in quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering What Next listeners 18 free meals, plus free dessert for life. And of course, free shipping on your first box. Go to homechef.com/whatnext. That is homechef.com/whatnext for 18 free meals and free dessert for life. homechef.com/whatnext. Must be an active subscriber to receive that free dessert. This episode is brought to you by Discover. It's smart to always have a few financial goals. And here's a really smart one you can set: earning cash back on what you buy every day. With Discover, you can. Get this. Discover automatically matches all the cash back you've earned at the end of your first year. Seriously, all of it. Discover trusts you to make smart decisions. After all, you listen to this podcast. See terms at discover.com/creditcard. I wonder if we can start out by just saying that the way that we talked about cishet women, like especially white married women during this election, was super weird.
It was so weird.
Like, so weird. Like, I remember that Democratic ad that came out with the couples going to vote, and the men are all like, yeah, are you voting for him? Yeah, I'm voting for him. Is your wife voting for him?
Did you make the right choice?
Sure did, honey.
Remember, what happens in the booth stays in the booth. Vote Harris Walls. Vote Common Good.
Like, it was so strange. There were these little stickers that you could get to put up in bathrooms, like, your vote is secret. He never has to know. All of this just totally gave me the heebie-jeebies. Was it the same for you?
Well, what about it creeped you out?
The implication was that a large proportion of women would lie to their husbands about their fundamental beliefs in their own civil rights and just, like, proceed onward on their merry way.
I think a lot of women do lie to their husbands about that. I clocked it as, like, weirdly necessary, but a strange display of it. But I didn't. I think there are a lot of women who actually have a really, really, really hard time separating themselves from what their husbands tell them they should think about the world.
Yeah.
It's tragic. It bums me out. And, I don't want to live like that, but a lot of women do.
So tell me about the women you profiled here.
There were 3 women who they were all married to straight white women married to straight white men in 3 different parts of the country. One was a centrist Democrat. One was a little more left leaning than that. One was, even further, further into the progressive side of it. And they were all having conflict with their husbands about how their husbands were planning on voting. And this was a long-standing fight. They'd been having it since the first time Trump ran.
Yeah, introduce me to them, because it's like there's these 3 women. Like, you have one as young as 30. She's in California, and she basically kind of found herself in this marriage where she was like, oh, hold it. We disagree about this.
Yeah, so there's 30-year-old Annie. She is an immigrant, but she's in California. There's a woman whose name is Beth. She's in her mid-50s. And she is in Colorado. And then there is Heather, who's in her early 50s in Pennsylvania.
And the 2 middle-aged women, they had, like, grown-ish kids who were older, basically. So they were committed.
Yes, the 2 older women had 2 kids each, both of whom were just entering adulthood or were, about to enter it. And then the younger woman who was 30, she just had a baby about a year prior. And she had a visa tied to her husband, too.
Oh, so it was very difficult it wasn't like she could just be like, I'm out of here. It would be complicated, especially with a kid.
It would be very complicated for her. Her kid's a citizen born in the United States. So, they all had different things to consider. One of the older women, she had recently had cancer and was exhausted and was thinking about her pension and was thinking about her job and how it would be impacted. All of them, except for this woman with a baby, all of them had kids telling their moms to leave.
Whoa.
And their kids were having conflicts with their fathers because of how their dads were voting. They were having arguments with dad about getting vaccinated, about, Project 2025, about trans rights, about, whether the Trump administration would try to roll back gay marriage rights or rights for queer and trans people,
So a couple of the women were really torn between their kids and their husbands.
Yeah, and I don't think these women were even trying to defend their husbands. I think they were just sort of stuck in the conflict with him.
One thing I think we need to make clear is, like, these weren't housewives that you profiled either. Like, they were making money.
These were all breadwinners in their families, all three of them.
Primary breadwinners.
Yes, yeah.
One was a lawyer.
Yeah, there was a lawyer. We have a veterinarian and a writer and an editor. So, and they were all, they were taking care of the kids and contributing to the household in a relatively dominant way, and having these arguments about, like, gender, and what a woman's role is in the world. It sounds incredibly frustrating. I'll say that.
Yeah. Can you tell me, like, a story from one of these women's lives that kind of shapes how you saw them and why you wanted to talk to them? Like, as anonymized as possible, I guess, but just I want to kind of get a concrete sense of them and why you were like, I need to know more about this.
The thing I couldn't get over the most, I think, was one of the women I talked to, after she got diagnosed with cancer and had to go through chemotherapy, and it was a rough recovery for her. Her husband wouldn't get vaccinated.
Even though she was immunocompromised.
She could not get the vaccine, and she's immunocompromised. She is actively going to the hospital and getting treatment. She's having a tough time with her body. Things are, she has to stay home because she's getting treatment during the pandemic, and so she can't be out too much because she doesn't want to get a cold, and he wouldn't get the vaccine.
I was wondering, like, the husbands, as the wives described them, did they describe them as good husbands? Like, other than Trump?
No, they. What's confusing is often they describe them as good fathers, and that's a little perplexing to me. And maybe I'm missing something because I don't have kids, but I don't know how you are a good parent if you are not being able to fully see the humanity of your partner and what they need from you and what they, need in life.
Yeah. I'm trying to think about how I would respond to that. When you're a parent, you don't want to be the bad guy. You want to be like the good parent.
Yeah, I think they're still compartmentalizing, and I understand that you have to. That is how you survive. But I think they're all they were at the point when I spoke to them that they were recognizing that the partnership was not there. They were having arguments with their husbands about baseline respect. Do you acknowledge me? Do you see me? Do you care about what I'm saying? And the answer was no. And then politics was kind of a microcosm of that larger rot.
Yeah, one thing I think your reporting really did well is chronicle how conflict, even really major conflict, can just like grow and exist in a relationship so that when you look at it from the outside, you're like, hold it, how's that thing hanging together over there? But it can just be, it becomes like part of the furniture. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I grew up in a environment where fighting was it was just a normal way of communicating. That was how we talked. And I still kind of am like that. I understand conflict as backbone, familial backbone. But it just sort of, it becomes the carpet and you're just stepping on it all the time.
Tell me about the first calls you had with these women after the election.
Annie was.
This is the younger woman with a small child.
The younger woman with the baby. She was she's really like kind of ebullient because she was having a good conversation with her husband. Trump winning scared him. It seemed like he got kind of radicalized in an interesting way. For Beth, the woman who had cancer, and she just sounded really tired. It just seemed she felt really drained and resigned, and she was so disappointed. I don't even think she could fully access her disappointment. And Heather was so angry and had filed for divorce, in fact. And while I was on the phone with her, because she's in the house still with her husband, he still lived there at the time. And while I was on the phone with her, she got a ring at the door, and it was a process server serving her with the divorce papers intended for him.
Whoa.
And she had to tell him to come back later.
Talking to Slate. Come back later.
Because you know what? Yeah, you can't sign for your own divorce papers. Fun fact.
So now we're a few months out from the election. Where are they in their process? You said one had filed for divorce. One was just super sad. The other was thinking maybe there's a little hope for us here.
So all three women are still married.
Wow.
Yeah.
When we come back, we answer the real question. Are these women happily married? Decisions made in Washington can affect your portfolio every day. But what policy changes should investors be watching? Listen to Washington Wise, an original podcast for investors from Charles Schwab, to hear the stories making news in Washington right now. Host Mike Townsend, Charles Schwab's managing director for legislative and regulatory affairs, takes a nonpartisan look at the stories that matter most to investors, including policy initiatives for retirement savings, taxes and trade, inflation concerns, the Federal Reserve, and how regulatory developments can affect companies, sectors, and even the entire market. Mike and his guests offer their perspective on how policy changes could affect what you do with your portfolio. Download the latest episode and follow at schwab.com/WashingtonWise, or wherever you listen. Decisions made in Washington can affect your portfolio every day. But what policy changes should investors be watching? Listen to Washington Wise, an original podcast for investors from Charles Schwab, to hear the stories making news in Washington right now. Host Mike Townsend, Charles Schwab's managing director for legislative and regulatory affairs, takes a nonpartisan look at the stories that matter most to investors, including policy initiatives for retirement savings, taxes and trade, inflation concerns, the Federal Reserve, and how regulatory developments can affect companies, sectors, and even the entire market. Mike and his guests offer their perspective on how policy changes could affect what you do with your portfolio. Download the latest episode and follow at schwab.com/WashingtonWise, or wherever you listen.
When you check out at the pharmacy, you see the journey from idea to medicine, thanks to our intellectual property system, or IP for short. IP safeguards inventions, like a new way to prevent seizures or lower cholesterol. And IP supports competition from other brands, then lower cost generics, which are 90% of prescriptions filled in the U.S. Innovation, competition, lower costs, thanks to IP. Learn more at phrma.org/IP Works Wonders.
So the women Scaachi followed stayed with their spouses, for now, at least. But staying has meant different things for each of them. Take, for instance, 30-year-old Annie, the youngest woman Scaachi had been reporting on.
Annie and her husband are doing really well. She says they're talking about it, and she's encouraged by his elasticity, his intellectual elasticity on it.
Doesn't sound like the other two are experiencing much emotional elasticity.
No. Beth is also still married. She continues to be very disillusioned and exhausted. She's really busy at work, and she still has health issues, so she hasn't made any big decisions. Her feelings have not changed. Her marriage continues to be really, really rocky. But Heather, interestingly enough, has had a complete change of heart. She regrets filing for divorce. She asked her husband to move back home. He had moved out. He won't. He's too upset. He won't return home. But she feels like she was too strident, and she let Trump and his acolytes ruin her marriage. And she regrets it. And she wishes she had stayed offline more.
Wow. I mean, Heather really did strike me because of her defeatism. Like, she talks about, I tried to resist MAGA, and what did I get at the end of the day? And it made me really sad for her, basically because it didn't seem like anyone was helping her to imagine being divorced and happy.
I mean, I don't think she really gave it much of a shot. I'll say that. Like, they were separated for mere weeks, I think, before she started to say that she had this big reversal. And I don't, I don't really agree with her assessment, which is that, people should have been happy with with centrist gains. She, I think, sort of abides by the argument that progressives were asking for too much in the election. And I think that ideology has permeated into her personal life, where she feels like she has asked too much of her husband. I think these were women who were having like modern experiences in the world, but were having really traditional experiences at home.
They were like severed.
Yeah. And I think a lot of women have that kind of relationship with the world, where like at work you are a powerful whatever, right? You have whatever agency, or you are who you are out in the world. But at home you are wife and mommy, and you have all these people to take care of, and this expectation that you're going to sort of accept this like father knows best situation happening at home. Maybe you do for a little while, but then it becomes about like the future of the country and your children. And then it gets a little, then maybe it isn't so easy to just say, okay, sure. Yes, honey, whatever you say.
I hadn't thought about the multiple personality aspects of this. I'm glad you brought that up, because I do think that's real. And I think in the months since the election, I've been wondering where that kind of multiple personalities thing goes. Like, I read this op-ed in the Times that just really, it just made me burn. How GOP men and women are changing their minds about how women should behave, what kind of roles they thought women should have. It's like a coming back together of that multiple personalities, right? It's like saying, oh no, you should be using your inside voice all the time.
Yeah. The goal is to not have multiple personalities. We have multiple personalities because we added the extra ones as we got rights. That is what it feels like. A winnowing of what it means to be a woman in the world. As restrictive as possible. And I do think that's also part of what's happening around like the conversation around trans girls and women, because it is usually about women.
It's about being less expansive.
Yeah, it's about having it be as small a definition as possible, and then also controlling what everybody does with their defined roles.
Yeah, I guess what struck me about it is like, I'd always recognized that this election was about how men thought of women. You know, if you watched the Republican National Convention, you saw Hulk Hogan. You saw Kid Rock.
Yeah.
You knew how those people saw women. What I guess I didn't imagine, maybe because I just wasn't letting myself, was how much it could impact how women see women and how retro we could get. And when I saw your characters, these women who were sort of going back into their shells post-election, that's what was on my mind, you know?
Yeah.
Because the data backs it up. The data shows that a majority of white women continued to support Donald Trump. So
yes, they did.
Like there was this thought going into the election, which you could see from that Democratic ad we talked about, the like, shh, we're going to vote for Kamala and not tell our husbands. There was this idea that maybe women would really come out and secretly, you know, put a woman in the White House.
Yeah, I think when everyone was talking about those white women Zooms and how much money they were raising, I think a lot of people thought like, oh, this is good. This is going to work. I mean, I felt it too for a little while, but it didn't. You know, I think that's a testament. I think there's a lot of white women who view themselves as, you know, they get there's a lot of protection in being a white woman, you know, and I think they often lean into that still. That's the reality of it.
I'm sort of curious. Things can change for your sources once they see their own stories in print, you know? Like they can see themselves and maybe understand themselves a little bit better when someone else is writing their story. Since your articles come out, have you been in touch with the women who were talking to you?
Yeah, I have. I don't think anything's different yet, but I do think it's offered them a different lens into their own lives. And yeah, I think that's hard to read. I think it's hard to watch.
Were they, I don't know, what did they say to you? Like, it sounds like they felt like it was an honest assessment.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I didn't get any complaints. Yeah, I think they felt it was an honest assessment. I think they're all in a place right now where they're just like, that's just what it is. And I think they have to decide if they want to make different choices based off of that. Look, marriage is a decision you make every day. Every day you wake up and you are deciding to be married. And the day that you decide you don't want to do it anymore is the day that you leave. And they just haven't made that decision yet. And maybe they will, but not yet. You know, I got a divorce for a constellation of reasons, and it was exhausting and hard. I'm glad I did it, but it's hard to get you just got to take the first step, but it's hard to get someone to take the first step.
Yeah. And you're not advocating divorce. Maybe we should say that, like, explicitly.
No, I am.
Oh, you are?
I don't care. Yeah, get a divorce. What do I care, Mary? I don't give a shit what anybody does. Do what you want. Leave him. Leave him. Like, fine.
Be free, woman.
Yeah, I don't have a problem telling people what to do. I just know it's not an effective tool.
To tell people what to do.
Yeah, it doesn't. If that worked, I would have more things. Give me your wallet. Like, what do you mean? But I think divorce is sick. Women who are divorced end up a lot happier. They tend to make more money. Their other relationships index higher in happiness. I think it's a good thing. And I think our society is like really fixated on endings and really agitated about the idea that things can end as if it means that it is a failure. But sometimes things run its course, and maybe we need to be more zen about loops closing.
I love that. Scaachi, I'm really grateful to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Scaachi Koul is a senior culture writer here at Slate. And before we go, I have a little announcement from our bosses here at the magazine. Because we all know we're going through this unprecedented time with the government laying off a ton of government workers. And the folks here at Slate thought, hey, why don't we do a solid for those workers who might still want all the critical journalism we do here at Slate, but not feel like they have the cash flow to support it right now. With all that said, if you are a government worker who has been laid off or is worried about being laid off, we're going to offer you 6 months of Slate Plus for free. That's right. You can join Slate Plus, our membership program, which means you get access to this podcast ad-free, complete access to the website full of articles, and you'll get that access without spending a dime for 6 months. The way to do it and find out more is to go to slate.com/fed-plus. That is slate.com/fed-plus. All right, that's the show. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, Madeline Ducharme, and Ethan Oberman. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Go track me down on Blue Sky. I'm at Mary Harris. All right, thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.
I'm Leon Nafok, and I'm the host of Slow Burn, Watergate. Before I started working on this show, everything I knew about Watergate came from the movie All the President's Men. Do you remember how it ends? Woodward and Bernstein are sitting at their typewriters, clacking away. And then there's this rapid montage of newspaper stories about campaign aides and White House officials getting convicted of crimes, about audio tapes coming out that prove Nixon's involvement in the cover-up. The last story we see is Nixon resigns. It takes a little over a minute in the movie. In real life, it took about 2 years.
5 men were arrested early Saturday while trying to install eavesdropping equipment. It's known as the Watergate incident.
What was it like to experience those 2 years in real time? What were people thinking and feeling as the break-in at Democratic Party headquarters went from a weird little caper to a constitutional crisis that brought down the president? The downfall of Richard Nixon was stranger, wilder, and more exciting than you can imagine. Over the course of 8 episodes, this show is going to capture what it was like to live through the greatest political scandal of the 20th century. With today's headlines once again full of corruption, collusion, and dirty tricks, it's time for another look at the gate that started it all. Subscribe to Slow Burn now, wherever you get your podcasts.